Hello everybody, once again it's me, James Wash, for another mediocre time. I'm doing this today to announce my next creative project in the next series of videos on the channel. I am going to make a video game in a week. Small one, but a video game. It's been a while since I've done any extensive programming or game making projects, so I thought it'd be fun to try and get back into the swing of it with a simple little space shooter. And I think I'd take this video today to talk about how I'm doing it, what I'm using, and why I like it. So, first off, basic principle of what I'm doing is a game called a bullet hell. Not quite a full bullet hell, I'd call it more of a bullet purgatory. But the basic concept of a bullet hell game is you have a little ship. You have a little character. Like, the Toho series, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but it's a bullet hell game and all the characters are like magical girls. And that's not important. But you have a little character, and they have a little box that you need to make sure stays safe and that enemies can't hit it. And what happens is, enemies will appear and shoot massive, absolutely absurd amounts of bullets at your little ship, oftentimes in rather artistic patterns. Like here, I tried to convey a ship firing a spiral pattern of bullets, making its way towards the ship, and the ship would have to dodge these in order to survive, and could probably fire back in its own right at the enemies in order to gain more points. And that's the basic concept. Like, imagine something like Galaga or Xevious. Xevious would be closer to what I'm going for, except with a lot more bullets and enemies on the screen at once. If you want to learn more about them, I highly recommend looking it up on YouTube. You can probably find some sample levels that will be absolutely insane, and the gameplay can be absolutely astonishing, just seeing people process all that information that quickly. I've tried some of the Toho games myself. They are hard. They are difficult beasts. The fact I don't read Japanese does not make the issue substantially easier for me. But anyways, I want to make something kind of like that, a little bit less intense, so I can play it, but I think that'd be a fun project. So, I'm going to be using a tool called, air conditioners kicked on, I'm using a tool called Godot. And I used to use a tool called Game Maker Studio. And I want to talk about why I switched and why I'm doing this in Godot now. Now, both Godot and Game Maker are free. Free helps. I don't like paying for things just to see if I'm going to like them or not. Especially when it comes to my own projects. So starting off free is a good start indeed. Now, Game Maker Studio generally has better documentation, generally, and more tutorials. It's generally a more popular, well, at least it used to be a more popular platform for making games. But why am I using Godot? Well, for one thing, Godot is really free. Godot is this thing called open source, which means that the code is open, and so anyone can take it and they can mod it, they can edit it, they can build their own things within and ask for it to be included with the main Godot build, and the people who run the project like it enough, they can integrate it into the things. And because it's open source, nobody pays for anything, It's free as in free beer, and also free as in you can do whatever you want with it. There's not the restrictions on it like there are with Game Maker Studio or Unity. In both of those, in the free version, you have to have a splash screen that demonstrates what engine you made it with, which is kind of ugly, and you can't really change it. And what's more, Game Maker Studio, and I especially hate them for this, because this didn't used to be the case, the free version doesn't make standalone programs. You can't export your game to something people can play in the free version of Game Maker Studio anymore. And I hate that. Godot, it's all for free, always has been, always will be. If you have an idea, you can get it out there, and it's great. And I love that. It's a community effort, and they're not doing it for the money, they're doing it for the love of what they're doing, and that's fantastic. Godot also is getting better. Godot is becoming increasingly popular in the indie dev space. They're getting better documentation, they're getting more tutorials about all sorts of things, they're getting substantially more popular. I think they're third at one point. I think they're third to like Unity and Game Maker. And sorry, just a little something got caught on my whiteboard. But yeah, Godot is free. It's really free. It's getting better in all these regards. The programming language is better. Game Maker Studio uses this thing called GML, which is its own like proprietary language. And I learned GML for Game Maker 7 and Game Maker 8, and eventually the first Game Maker Studio version. But it's not nice. It's not clean. I don't care for it. It frustrates me. Godot uses a thing called GDScript, which is its own proprietary script, but is very Python-esque, and I already know Python, so picking up lots of GDScript is not particularly hard, and what differences there are typically influenced by other real languages, like C#, so I can sort of, like, pick up bits of, like, other languages when I'm learning GDScript. I can, like, learn other syntax things, and that will help me in the future. And that's something I really like about GDScript. And while I'm not making anything in 3D right now, Godot's 3D support is leagues beyond Game Maker Studios. Game Maker has never been a 3D engine. I have, like, made, like, a little, like, Doom clone sort of thing in the past using Game Maker Studio, but it's horrible. Really, it was more like a Wolfenstein clone, but none of you care. None of you care. Okay. So, all around, Godot is better than Game Maker Studio, and I just like it a lot more. And one big difference is in sort of like the design styles, and I'd like to talk about that for a bit. And I'm going to split the board down this way. Thank you for listening to a random nerd rant about what he's doing and why he likes different things. It means a lot to me. Okay. Now, Game Maker Studio. Let's draw the game. Screen. Ship. Dots are dangerous. Beep boop. All that jazz. Now, in Game Maker, at least Game Maker Studio, which was the last Game Maker engine I used, and I wasn't particularly pleased with it, there are all the things on the screen, all like the things that like have code, are objects. And objects are basically these things which have like sprites and code attached to them, so that that defines their behavior and how they interact with each other. Objects are placed into rooms, which are kind of like screens or levels in the game. Like, your menus will often be rooms, and then, like, the levels will be rooms, and credits will be its own room, maybe. It's all sorts of different things can be rooms. Basically, whenever, like, the purpose of the screen changes, it changes to a different room. And all of your assets have to be preloaded into, like, different things, like sprites, the music or the audio, just audio clips in general. Like, there's a specific feature called timelines, which are kind of useful for certain things. Essentially, you have a time period, and you can, like, use you can assign the timeline to run on an object, and it will just control the object's behavior at certain points in time, or invoke other behaviors. So as you can see, this is kind of like divided pretty heavily. You have a lot of different stuff to manage. And what I really hate about this is, at least for me, it was difficult to get objects to interact in a certain way. Like, for example, one of the most basic things I've seen in lots of bullet hells is sort of like a cross of bullets spinning through the air. So, like, getting something like a cross of, like, obstacles to spin in a constant circle and yet still have all of these objects still behave independently is really hard to do. Excuse me. Is really hard to do in Game Maker. At least I never found a good way to do it. And that's frustrating because it forces you to rely more heavily on the inheritance system, which sort of like means like, okay, all of these have to be like instances, have to be children of like a basic bullet instance that can hurt your ship, and all of the bullets are going to be children of that, and then you have to control all of these from some sort of other object in order to get them moving properly. And it's just a massive hassle. But Godot has a great way of sidestepping this. Same game. You couldn't tell the difference. It has the same graphics, same gameplay, and everything. Basically, you don't have to load the assets in. You can just like have it in like a file and provide paths to it for the game to like pick up and recognize when it's run. So that's one thing that's like really helpful. And all of the objects in the game are called nodes. And nodes are a little bit, there's lots of different kinds of nodes. There's only one kind of object. Objects are objects, but there's lots of different kinds of nodes. They can be areas in space, they can be audio players, they can be audio listeners if you want to do directional audio. They can be models, they can be collision boxes, they can be sprites, they can be color rectangles, they can be HUD elements. A node can be all sorts of things. And the nodes compose things called scenes. And basically a scene makes up what we would call objects in Game Maker Studio. Like, a ship would be a scene. A bullet would be a scene. But in like a level, or like a level would be a scene that has lots of other scenes put into it. And that's really what makes Game Maker, to me, way more useful and way more usable than Game Maker. What makes Godot more usable than Game Maker? I'm not sure if that came out properly. It is almost midnight. I am very tired. You can compose scenes in other scenes. So like this cross here, very difficult to do. You have to have all these different bullet objects, and you have to somehow control them all to do this simultaneously. I dislike that a lot. But in Godot, and I did this earlier, you could have a node 2D object, which is just a basic node for just like a basic, just like the smallest blip of an idea for a 2D, for like something in a 2D game. And that can be a scene that consists of an animation player, which is a node that you can use to like invoke code at certain times, kind of like timelines. But it can also be made of all the bullets you need to make the cross. And they will all still be destroyed individually, they'll still all can move independently, but because you can composite them into this node 2D object, along with an animation player, the cross functionality that I want, and like other shapes that I could make and just general control over game objects is so much easier, because I can make objects that are composed of other objects, and that allows me to define how things operate a lot more, just a lot easier. This would take a lot of time. This would take a lot of code. This would just take a lot. This doesn't. I know, I did this earlier today. It took me about an hour, and that's just because I've never tried anything like this before in Godot. But I made a simple little cross thing, and I plan to make lots of other patterns as well. I plan to have, like, animation players making all sorts of different formations for the levels the little ship flies upwards. And that's another thing why I like Godot. It's just its architecture for, like, how you make things and put them together is very different from how I would do things in Game Maker Studio. And it's in a way that's way better. And I just love that. I love it so much. Oops. Okay, didn't get any ink on me. That's fortunate. Erasing. So yeah, that's why I'm using Godot. Just all around, I like it a lot more. I think the architecture is better, and I think my workflow while I'm using Godot is better. I think it just puts me in a better place. So, probably should have led with this. What am I planning to do? What are my goals for this overall? Okay, well, single level. One level. And I'm going to have, let's say, I don't know how, okay, you know what, I don't have goals for this. I just want to make something interesting. If it has 5 enemies, it has 5. If it has 10, it has 10. If it has 4 bullet patterns, it has 4. If it has 20, it has 20. I just want to screw around with this for a week. See where I can get with it. See where I can get where I'm satisfied. Just like, hey, I did some cool stuff here. Not going to really bother with music. Not really going to bother with audio or art, because that's not where my skills lie. I'm pretty good at understanding programming logic and stitching things together that way. I'm not terribly good at anything else. But that's fine. I don't need to be. I do this mainly to practice programming. That's my favorite part. But yeah, I'm going to work on this throughout the week. I plan to post daily updates. Today, I programmed the player's movement. I've programmed a basic bullet object, and I've programmed a cross pattern. And the most important part of that is not even the pattern itself, but the fact that now I know how to control things, finally, with the animation player. And that's going to be important for spawning enemies, which I'm going to program, for making those bullet patterns, for handling all sorts of in-game behavior as the player progresses. And really, that was like the big takeaway from this. I didn't know the animation player existed until like a day or two ago when I asked online about it. Asked for something like the timeline functionality in Game Maker Studio. And the animation player does all of that and makes other stuff like bullet patterns a lot easier. And I've learned how to use it today, and I'm super psyched to try using it some more in the future. And I hope I'll be able to, like, turn out something that you might find is a little bit interesting for 5 minutes, if nothing else. But yeah, that's my next project, making a video game in a week. See ya tomorrow, I hope. I hope I remember to keep updating these.